I'll make it a decaf today.
Scott Pilgrim!
What did you do with my sister?
Once upon a time, there was a young man named Scott Pilgrim. Scott was a slacker who played bass guitar in a mediocre garage band called Sex Bob-omb. He was content with his mediocre life until he met the girl of his dreams, Ramona Flowers. However, there was a catch. In order to date Ramona, Scott had to defeat her 7 evil exes.
Mr. Pilgrim! I'm Ramona's first evil ex-boyfriend.
What?
What was that all about?
If we're gonna date, you may have to defeat my 7 evil exes.
In epic video game style battles, this is the premise of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, a movie that is as entertaining as it is original. The film, directed by Edgar Wright, is a masterpiece of visual storytelling. It is a film that feels like a comic book brought to life. Wright expertly blends live action with animation, video game graphics, and comic book panels to create a world that is both fantastical and relatable. From the opening credits, which feature a classic 8-bit video game style sequence, the film announces its intention to be a celebration of all things nerdy and geeky. Michael Cera is perfectly cast as Scott Pilgrim, bringing a likable slacker charm to the role. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is equally as impressive as Ramona Flowers, capturing both her cool exterior and inner turmoil. The supporting cast, including Kieran Culkin, Alison Pill, Ellen Wong, and Chris Evans, all shine in their roles, adding depth and humor to the film. But what really sets Scott Pilgrim vs. the World apart is its style. The film is a visual feast, filled with rapid-fire editing, stunning visual effects, and clever camera work. Wright uses the language of film to tell the story in a way that is unique and engaging. The film is packed with Easter eggs and references to video games. It's a film that rewards repeated viewings, as there is always something new to discover. The film's music is another standout element. The score, composed by Nigel Godrich, perfectly captures the film's tone, blending elements of rock, punk, and electronic music. The film's use of licensed music is equally impressive, with several memorable scenes set to songs by Beck, Metric, and the Rolling Stones. At its core, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a story about growing up and learning to take responsibility for one's actions.
It's actually a really good garlic bread. Garlic bread is my favorite food. I could honestly eat it for every meal, or just eat it all the time without even stopping.
You get fat.
No, why would I get fat?
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
Scott Pilgrim starts the film as a self-absorbed slacker who's content to let life pass him by. However, his quest to win Ramona's heart forces him to confront his own shortcomings and become a better person. It's a message that's universal and relatable. In addition to its impressive storytelling and style, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is also a film that is full of heart. The relationship between the characters feels genuine and heartfelt, and the film's final act is both emotionally satisfying and thrilling. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is a coming-of-age story that explores the themes of love, self-discovery, and the challenges of growing up. At the beginning of the movie, Scott is a typical slacker who is not taking life seriously. He is not happy with his band, and his relationship with Nice Chu is not very serious. However, when he meets Ramona, he is forced to confront his own flaws and insecurities. Ramona is not just a love interest, but a catalyst for Scott's personal growth. Through his battles with Ramona's exes, Scott learns important lessons about himself and what he truly wants in life. He realizes that he needs to take responsibility for his actions and start treating people with respect. He also learns that love is not a game and that he needs to fight for the people that he cares about. In addition to Scott's personal growth, the movie also explores the idea of self-acceptance. Each of Ramona's exes represent a different aspect of her past, and by defeating them, Scott is helping her come to terms with her own history. Similarly, Scott's battles with the exes are also a reflection of his internal struggles. Each battle represents a different obstacle that he must overcome to be the person that he wants to be. The movie also explores the idea of identity and how it can be shaped by our relationships with others. Scott is defined by his relationships with Knives and Ramona, and his battles with the exes are a reflection of his attempts to define himself outside of those relationships. In the end, he realizes that his identity is not defined by who he is with, but by who he is as a person. Another important theme of the movie is the idea of forgiveness. Scott's battles with the exes are not just about defeating them, but about forgiving them for the mistakes they made in the past. This is particularly evident with his battle with Gideon, Ramona's final ex, someone that is very manipulative and very controlling. And instead of fighting him, Scott chooses to forgive him and move on. The movie also explores the idea of the power of friendship. Scott's bandmates and friends play an important role in his journey. They support him throughout his battles with the exes and help him come to terms with his own flaws. In the end, it is their friendship that helps him overcome his final obstacle and become the person he wants to be. Unfortunately, despite its critical acclaim, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was not a commercial success. It was released in 2010, a year that saw the release of several other high-profile films, including Inception, Toy Story 3, and The Social Network. The film was also marketed poorly, with its unique style and story not resonating with mainstream audiences. However, in the years since its release, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World has gained a cult following. Its unique style and message have resonated with viewers who appreciate its celebration of all things nerdy and geeky. The film has become a touchstone for a generation of young people who grew up playing video games and reading comic books. If it were to release today, it would do wonders in the box office. But with time has come with the realization to many people that while Ramona may seem initially like a quirky and fun love interest, a closer examination reveals that she is a toxic and emotionally abusive person. One of the most significant ways in which Ramona is toxic is her tendency to use Scott and the other men in her life as a means of escaping her emotional baggage. Throughout the series, we learned that Ramona has a complicated past and has dated several men who have hurt her in various ways. Instead of dealing with this trauma and moving on, Ramona chooses to constantly move to new cities and start new relationships, never fully confronting her feelings or taking responsibility for her actions. This behavior is particularly evident in her treatment of Scott. Ramona is quick to move in with Scott and rely on him for emotional support, but she consistently pushes him away when he tries to get to know her better. She keeps important details about herself hidden from him, and even when he does learn about her previous relationships, she is dismissive and vague about the details. Ramona also frequently puts Scott in dangerous situations, both physically and emotionally. In one notable scene, Ramona invites Scott to a concert, but when they arrive, they realize that the concert is actually a fight to the death with one of her ex-boyfriends. Rather than warning Scott or trying to protect him, Ramona watches as he fights for his life, only stepping in to intervene when he is in serious danger. In one scene, she encourages Scott to fight her ex-boyfriend Gideon, even though she knows that Gideon is a dangerous and manipulative person. She seems to get a thrill out of watching Scott suffer and struggle despite claiming to care about him. Ramona's emotional manipulation is also evident in her treatments of Knives' child. Ramona initially befriends Knives in order to get close to Scott, but then proceeds to ignore her and belittle her throughout the series. She encourages Scott to break up with Knives and even gets into a physical fight with her at one point. Ramona's treatment of Knives is cruel and unnecessary, and it speaks to her willingness to use others as a means to an end. Finally, Ramona is toxic in her inability to take responsibility for her actions. Throughout the series, she consistently blames others for her problems and refuses to accept any responsibility for her own mistakes. When Scott confronts her about her past relationships, she deflects and makes excuses rather than owning up to her behavior. She even goes as far as to blame Scott for her decision to move away, despite the fact that it was entirely her own choice. Scott Pilgrim was ahead of its time, and the fact that it flopped commercially despite its star-studded cast, crazy animations, and engaging storytelling is still bizarre. What do you think of this movie? Go ahead and comment below. I read all comments.